All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so dearly for joining Corinne and I in the It's My Time to Heal webinar. And I titled it that because it's always your time to heal. It's a choice that you make. It doesn't rely on circumstance or the other people around you. It is a decision you can always make in your mind, and it is a consistent decision that you can make. And I was talking to Corinne earlier, and I was sharing that healing is an attitude. It's something that you can believe in and commit to no matter what is going on in your external world. You have control of your mind and what you choose, and you can choose a healing attitude. And certainly that is what A Course in Miracles encourages us to do. Yeah. So I wanted to begin by sharing just a bit about my healing story. Some of you have heard my healing story through a podcast that I did with Corinne. And I guess my biggest healing story was from vertigo, which I had for a few years. And one day I had just become so fed up from the vertigo. The vertigo bouts were lasting for about 5 to 7 hours, which is a really long time for your world to be spinning. And they would happen anytime. One time it happened in the middle of a shopping mall. So I had grown sick of it. And when I started to look up vertigo, I saw that one of the ways that the world decided to heal people of vertigo was to destroy the inner ear. And that really stood out to me as something that I didn't want. I didn't want to destroy any parts of my body for healing. I knew as a Course in Miracles student and teacher that there was a better way I could use my mind. And so I decided to commit to using the Course. And for 2 months, I did. And I had the most profound healing experience. And a little bit about that was I had an ear, nose, and throat specialist appointment coming up in 2 months. That's why I committed to that 2-month window for me to commit to the Course. And in that 2 months, I practiced the true forgiveness process. I worked on healing. I worked on the Course lessons. And one of the things I also did is that every time I felt a symptom or a fear in regard to what I was trying to heal, I would calm down, relax, and implement the true forgiveness process. And then I would just carry on with my day. So I used the symptoms as my red flag to heal, as opposed to a reason to fall back into fear and to go deeper into fear. And after 2 months, 2 days before the ear, nose, and throat appointment, I told my husband, Eric, that I was uncomfortable with going to the appointment because I was actually feeling better. I had had no more vertigo. My ear, I could actually hear out of it for the first time in over a decade. And I lifted it up to the Holy Spirit. I said, Holy Spirit, whatever you want to do with this ear, nose, and throat appointment, it's all yours. And I then was proceeding down my stairs, and I have a little Buddha statue. And I looked at the Buddha, and I saw him, and I was filled with this feeling that he was a man, and he became enlightened. I am having the human experience. Enlightenment is also for me, just as it is for you and all of us. And in that moment, I really felt that truth. And I felt my connection with God, with my source. And I felt like nothing could compete with God and his love. And I just had this that's it moment. I'm choosing God. And I did. And again, I just reclaimed, Holy Spirit, you take charge of the ear, nose, and throat appointment. I give the vertigo and this healing process over to you. And I'm just carrying on with my day. I don't know what anything looks like, but I leave it in your capable hands. And sure enough, the next day I got a call from the ear, nose, and throat specialist receptionist. And lo and behold, the doctor can't see me because something came up. And I don't know what that was. And that was just fine with me. So I took that as a permission slip to not go ahead with the ear, nose, and throat appointment, which I felt very safe to do. But then that evening, I had the most beautiful dream that I felt a tickle in my right ear in the dream, and I was tickling, I was trying to scratch it, and out of my right ear, which was the problematic ear, all of this black oil, and it was like unclogging a drain. It was just nasty. All of this gross oil was coming out of my ear in the dream, and it was splattering all over the place. And one of the things that also came out of my ear was a little monkey hand. And I referred to the ego as the cheeky little monkey in the corner of our minds. So in the dream, I even kind of became a little bit lucid and realized, hey, that's the ego. And it just continued to unclog. At a point, it just stopped. And I felt the lightness go all the way up my neck, through my ear, and out the top of my head. And when I woke up, I knew I had been healed. And that has been over 3 years ago. I have never had a bout of vertigo since. I have not even had any of the symptoms of the clogged ear, the loss of hearing. Everything has been perfectly healed. So that's one of my healing experiences, and it was purely due to my commitment and my work with the course. And so I'm going to be touching upon certain parts of that and other healing experiences that I've had throughout the webinar. And now I invite Corinne to share her healing story.
Oh, thank you, Fiona. And are you going to talk later about how you later found that there was actually a name for the disease?
Yes, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, because one of the questions I got that is to be answered in the later part of the webinar, it's a really cool story, and I'm going to share about that. Yeah.
I just want to make sure we don't forget that. Thank you. Thank you so much. And, before I share a little bit, I just want to pause and just give a huge shout out to you for being inspired to pull this webinar together, for doing all the tech stuff, and just out of the goodness of your heart to be like, you contacted me and you're like, Corinne, I just want to motivate people to do this healing work because it works. And I was like, yes. So I really want to give a shout out to you for pulling this together, because I know we have people here on Zoom, tuning in on Facebook, and lots of people who'll be watching the replay. So we all thank you very much for this. It's really going to be a really powerful way to spend some time together. So, when you prompted me, to share my healing story, earlier when we were speaking, I was like, well, I don't know which one to share. I could just tell stories all night. And I know that we're not here to just tell stories. We're here to teach and hear and learn and strengthen course principles. But the stories, I feel like, are relatable, and everybody can, really wrap their heads around, because I think both of our stories are very relatable. Both of us have had massive anxiety issues. That's probably most people who have come to this webinar who are familiar with my work know that I wrote a book about my healing from anxiety disorders with A Course in Miracles. That has been probably the I don't even want to say the biggest way in which I've healed. It's been perhaps one of the most significant, because I was so debilitated for so long with so many ways that anxiety kept me small. And not only do I feel free of that now, but the piece that I want to share that is current is that I still have experiences now. I'm already getting into a little bit of content, but our belief in separation from God is the source of all sickness, of all pain, of all suffering. And as we even just start to chip away at that belief, because I'm not saying my belief in separation from God is healed. I mean, I wake up every morning and I still think I'm Corinne, right? Exactly. So it's a journey and a process, but it's something that I am steadfastly committed to looking at and to healing. And as we go there, we become so surprised by the things that get healed that maybe we weren't even working on. We weren't even expecting them to heal. And so in my journey in healing from anxiety disorders, some of the other ways in which I've been pleasantly surprised by how the healing has come about. To give a very recent example, in July, some of you may have seen my Facebook or my Instagram post of me walking down the street in Lisbon in Portugal, because that was my first, it was a significant experience for me, because it was my first international plane flight, and international, like about a week by myself in a foreign country, which 5 years ago, even 6 years ago, I don't know if I would have done. I don't know if I would have been ready for that. It was just way too scary. And the shift, the change comes in because I just feel so like my trust has grown in such a deep way that we do not walk alone, that no matter where I am in the world, I can pause and ask for help, and there will be help. There will be someone to help me. And quick story, because this is like a perfect example. So my husband joined me after a week. So I was there by myself for a week, and then he joined for the second week. And we got into a situation where we got on a bus with a bus driver who did not speak any English. And as soon as we stepped on the bus, he started screaming at us because we went in the exit. We went in the wrong door because the door that we thought we were supposed to go in, the indoor, he didn't open. So I don't know if he was just like messing with us or what, but he was screaming at the top of his lungs in Portuguese. We have no idea what he's saying. I'm flustered. I can't like type into Google Translate, what he's saying. It all happened so fast. A woman steps up from the bus and she starts translating. Like, again, there's help always. And so the fact that I could travel alone, I wasn't working on my fear of, flying abroad or traveling on a plane. I wasn't actively working on that. It was the byproduct. It was something that fell away as I am committed to healing this belief in separation from source.
Yeah.
So that experience of having my first international flight and trip and feeling so secure and so safe and so trusting in God is another manifestation of how the healing from anxiety and working on this belief and sense of separation has had that trickle down effect of showing up in other ways. Now, it doesn't stop there. The other healings that I've had recently have to do with a very challenging family relationship that's been lifelong, extremely painful, extremely filled with a lot of conflict. This is somebody who is convinced that Course in Miracles is like the worst thing in the world and I shouldn't be doing it. And it's been a very, very challenging relationship. And because of the Course, because of doing everything that we are going to be talking about, and healing happens through our relationships. And so this healing in this relationship, I still pinch myself that like there's been such a profound shift in our experience. And it's from being willing to close the gap, the seeming gap that we believe is there that's not really there. So that's another example. And I'll share just one other thing, and perhaps we'll reference this as we go. There have been a number of intense experiences that I've been witness to lately. For instance, at the end of the summer on Labor Day weekend, there was actually a drowning at the beach that my husband works at and that we attend. And I was there. I was there when they were searching, and it was quite upsetting. I have some other friends who are going through some very difficult illnesses. And I realized that my trust in the truth has gotten so much stronger that I know now that this is a facade. This is not, it doesn't mean I don't get tripped up by it, but that there's a deep sense of just knowing that what is beyond this veil is home. But what I realized was that it's in the interim. So if that's home and it seems like it's going to be someplace we go later, which is a false perception, but it's the suffering and the sickness part in the meantime that can still really hook me. And so I realized, I was like, I'm in a training zone. I'm in training right now to learn how to see past the picture. So in all of these situations, the drowning, the people who I know who are going through illness, it's all an opportunity to see past the picture, which again is back to where healing, what we're talking about with healing, with sickness being a false witness of the ego trying to just convince us that this is real. So there have been extremely big shifts in the situations that I just mentioned, with recognizing that I'm simply in training to see past the picture, and I'm so dedicated to being willing to do so, to go beyond that. So that, again, it's healing in a lot of different ways: physical, mental, emotional, relationships, all that. So this is good stuff, and it works. And that's why I'm just so happy we're talking about this.
Well, and it's true. It's once you experience it, like, we're taught in A Course in Miracles that the Holy Spirit will speak through us in our own minds. And that development of trust really comes from the evidence that we're given that it works, like the preface to the lessons, right? You don't need to believe in it, right? But just implement it. Just give it a go, because the Holy Spirit knows that once you've handed things over to him, once you've given it a whirl, that he'll give you the evidence that's going to work for you personally to understand that, oh my goodness, it does work. That no one else needs to convince you. We can inspire, demonstrate, and motivate. But the Holy Spirit in each and every single one of our minds, as he is, can help speak to us in our own way, in our own experiences. And that evidence is just waiting for you to choose it. And that is why it's so exciting. Like, you know, yeah, like maybe in my 20s, it'd be like, oh, something happens, and you're like, you may not even have the awareness that there's another way to see things better, or that healing is even a possibility. You just think it's a part of life. Mm-hmm. And it's just how things go. And you get caught up in the drama and the conflict, because that's how the ego keeps itself alive in us. And that separation is through conflict. So whether conflict within ourselves and other people and the world itself. And we get used to it. And I like to refer to that as being comfortable in conflict, right? We're just used to it and familiar with it. And so it works in its own little way for us. And when you start your spiritual path and you start to heal, you then can actually, like, I get excited when a challenge comes up. I'm like, ooh, what will this healing look like? Or you know, especially if it's particularly challenging, you're like, wow, I cannot wait till that heals. Like, but it's exciting to know that you don't need to live with it. And that is one of the most beautiful things of A Course in Miracles, is it's teaching us literally a better way. And we are the ones who need to choose that every moment. Yeah. Every moment.
And that's so key, is that what we're talking about is a moment to moment practice. Because if we're not watching our minds moment to moment, I know for me, I will slip, you know, I'll go right down. I love that image that came to me, and that it comes to my mind and I share it. It's like sitting on a railing of a staircase, like a spiral staircase. Yeah. And the moment you choose ego, it's like, boom, you slide down and you're in the basement. And like, yeah. So we have to watch our minds.
Absolutely. And because, you know, we are creatures of habit, right? And because we do have that ego habit going on, you know, slipping and falling down into the spiral staircase, we fall into it so quickly and easily, purely because it's habit. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think it's all important for us to recognize that we shouldn't beat ourselves up for having fallen into it. And, you know, maybe it's a few minutes, maybe it's a few seconds, maybe it's a few days, where eventually we'll all start to recognize, you know, that's been bothering me for quite some time, or I'm really having an emotional response here. I'm really recognizing it. I think it's important for us not to feel guilty for having that experience. In fact, we should start to congratulate ourselves for going, oh my goodness, I recognized it. Mm-hmm. I became aware eventually. And that is incredible on its own. And, you know, Eckhart Tolle, the author of The Power of the Now, would teach us, you know, that the ego can sneak in the back door. and one of those ways that I think the ego likes to sneak in the back door is for us to go, oh, I'm aware that I should heal. Why didn't I do this sooner? And oh my goodness, I spent so much time. It's okay. It's not a competition. We're all going at our own rate. And so I really want to encourage everyone to not feel guilty. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to get super embarrassed sometimes and, you know, deal with sickness and hurt relationships and things like that. But that's okay. We're in it together. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of lose the guilt, because that's just the ego coming back in the back door again. And let's just move forward, recognizing that none of us are free of those ego effects. We all experience it in some regard. So
one of my favorite lines from the Course is that a happy learner cannot feel guilty about learning.
Right, so exactly.
No matter what, it is just so imperative, like you said, that we not feel guilty for our learning. And that means if you're watching right now and you're struggling with sickness, and some of what we say, because we're going to get into our content shortly, and you know what the Course teaches us about healing. If guilt gets triggered, like, oh, you know, I'm sick, I must be doing something wrong, because that's immediately where the mind goes. Yes. That's the ego trying to get in there again. That is guilt. That is not what we're going for. What we're going for is the undoing of guilt. So it's imperative that if we find ourselves starting to slip into that thinking that, oh, you know, I must be doing something wrong because I'm sick, catch that thought and hand it over to the Holy Spirit.
Totally.
Happy learner cannot feel guilty about learning. And if we are sick, if we're suffering, if we're facing a challenge, somebody in our life is facing a challenge, it is coming up to be healed. So like you said, welcome it and say, here's another layer
Yeah.
to look at.
Yeah. And I like to refer to our challenges as the stepping stones to God. Like that's what if you use it correctly, that's what it's for. You're going home. And it's beautiful, right? So I don't know. Yeah, we really need to let ourselves off the hook there. Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to pause. Can we all see how this can be like a 5-hour webinar? Because we haven't even gotten into our outline yet.
Exactly. Corinne and I have talked a couple of times this week, and we're like, today Corinne was like, we could hit record right now.
Yeah. We just start going. So
totally. And that's all good. So let's get into our content. And so we sent out some pointers that we're going to touch on. So we're going to touch on all of those things and refer to our own experiences, just because I think it's really important to help make this work practical. Some people are like, who am I to heal? Who am I to do this work? Well, you are everything. So you are exactly it. So get started. So what A Course in Miracles teaches us, I'm going to begin with healing. So the main thing that A Course in Miracles teaches us about healing is that it is of the mind, right? So I think some people, I love the mind, I love the right mind. And I think some people are very quick to disregard the mind. And that is purely because, and you can let me know your thoughts on this, Corinne, but that is purely because we identify with the ego mind. And when we identify with the ego mind, of course, you're going to hate that experience. Of course, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, I'm not that. And that negativity, where did that thought come from? Like, I can absolutely understand. But what you are is part of the mind of God. You're part of that one mind. So in the Manual for Teachers, under the clarification for terms, under mind, we have the wrong mind of the ego, and then we have the right mind, where we have the Holy Spirit. So, and our minds are so powerful. As we're taught in the Course, the mind is always creating. It never sleeps. So just with that sentence there, I think we need to acknowledge that we have very powerful minds. It is just the ego who is trying to demean our minds and tell us that we're powerless. And that is because the ego actually uses our minds against us. So I think it's important for us to recognize, I may not be in love with the ego mind, but I have a right mind where the Holy Spirit resides and speaks to me. And that helps to counter the wrong mind. And then we go to the one mind. We go home. And that is where God resides. So I think when we acknowledge healing, we have to acknowledge the power of our minds. And, as the Course in Miracles describes itself, that it is a course in mind training, right? So we can't afford to disregard the mind anymore.
Back to my train of thinking on, all I was going to say is that I'm really glad that you emphasize that healing is at the level of the mind. If we have new people listening who aren't familiar with A Course in Miracles, this can be a new idea, a challenging idea, to think that all healing comes from the level of the mind. Because again, what I'm so fine-tuned into, having come from a very fearful, very anxious mind, is what the mind will do with that. Like, if all healing comes from the mind, and is coming from my mind, well, why am I doing this to myself? Or how can you say I would do this to myself? We immediately want to go into that place of blame. So again, I encourage you to catch that, label it as a fear thought, and be willing to see it differently, because this is really important. This is where freedom lies, in recognizing that healing happens at the level of the mind. This is where our healing occurs. So, and our freedom, our absolute freedom, occurs here as well.
So when we look at healing, what we're taught in A Course in Miracles, so for some of you who are familiar with the Course, you know this, and others who are maybe just starting the Course, is the ego mind is really the representative of fear and separation. And it stems from the tiny mad idea, where we feel that we decided to walk away from our one true love, our source, the God mind. And that is an idea of separation. So boom, we all experience the separateness, the separate bodies, and even down to like the micro level, right, where cells are splitting, everything's splitting. And that's the ego world. And then, so that's the tiny mad idea, and we feel horribly guilty for it. Now, what I think is important to recognize is that a lot of that guilt is held at the level of the unconscious mind. So we're not always aware of it. We have those happy moments where we can easily say, I feel great. I'm not aware of any guilt. But I have a little test, because some course students are like, what do I have to feel guilty about? Or I don't really resonate with that. And I always say, check in with how you're feeling when a cop car pulls up behind you. The sirens aren't on, nothing's happening, but check in with that feeling. And, you know, did you get a little nudge in your stomach? And that is a hint of the guilt. And guilt can show up as fear, sadness, anger. It doesn't necessarily show up in our traditional view of guilt, where like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that. I feel so horrible. It doesn't always show up that way. So for new course students, that's really what we're saying. Guilt is that one source idea that we separated from God, and then it shows up in all these different ways as sickness and pain. And but then we're taught in A Course in Miracles that in healing, there is one idea that changes that corrects that separation idea, and that is known as the atonement. And the atonement principle is, I never left God. It's that simple. I never left my source. And if you recall in my story when I was healing from vertigo and I looked at the Buddha, that is what I said to myself. I felt it through every cell of my being. I never left God. I am one in Him. And everything changed from that one beautiful idea. So healing is of the mind. We heal by using our right minds. And when we use our right minds, we connect to eventually enlightenment. And that's the one mind experience. And the atonement principle corrects all those ego thoughts.
That's beautiful. I would just love to add 2 points.
Yes.
One is, again, for new course students and for seasoned course students who just need to hear this again, because I need to hear this many, many times,
Me too.
to remember that God is wholly loving and actively loves you.
Yes.
There is no condemnation. There's no fear. There's no guilt. There's no blame. There's no judgment in God. There's none of that. Those are human ideas that we have put onto God. So when we're referring to God, we're not referring to the dude with the white beard sitting up there orchestrating, things with like marionettes. That's not what we're referring to. We're referring to our source that completely and wholly loves us and knows that we are still at home and innocent, and even though we're dreaming this crazy dream. So I just wanted to add that bit about God. I also wanted to add that our thinking, what you just said about the unconscious guilt, is really important to tune into a little bit, because that was a concept, as you said, I was very out of touch with that for a long time. I was like, guilty? I don't feel guilty. What are you talking about? And I posed this question once to a class that I was teaching about the course, and I'll pose this to everybody now. So think about the last time you slipped and you lashed out at your brother or your sister or your parent or your spouse. Think of that last time that you slipped up in a big way and just lost it. Ask yourself and be radically honest. What do you think God thinks of you in that moment? And the knee-jerk feeling is probably going to be some type of guilt or shame, like that knee-jerk, before the loving mind wants to come in and say, no, God accepts, that knee-jerk ego thought could be that God thinks bad of you, for doing that, or is ashamed of you in some way. That's a reflection of our unconscious fear and unconscious belief of God. And it's really, our unconscious guilt. And it's really important that we exhume and release all fear of God that we have in our mind. So the moment that we can touch it, I like to think about, I used to say phrases like, if God takes you to it, God takes you through it. And when I looked at that more closely, I was like, if God takes you to it, God's not a loving God. If God's taking you to a challenge, if God takes you through it, that's nice, but not if God's taking you to it. And I realized that adopting phrases like that, those are a reflection of our unconscious fear of God, that we think that God punishes and teaches lessons and does all that. So it's important that we out that out of our mind, be willing to look at any guilt that arises, to recognize that we are not guilty, we have not separated, we've done nothing wrong, because again, if there's any fear there of God, we're going to have resistance of moving toward God, because we're going to think we're going to lose something, something's going to be taken away, we'll be condemned, whatever. So I just wanted to add that in.
Absolutely. And, and I'll be touching a bit on this later, but when the mind is in fear, you're not hearing the Holy Spirit. So you're certainly not connecting to God. So I think it's important to recognize when we are in fear, and whether you're just feeling the physical pain of sickness or whatever it might be, and if you're feeling fearful about all of that, then just to recognize that you're not connecting with Spirit perfectly in that moment, and that's okay. You kind of just want to prepare your mind, calm down, relax, and just get to a better place so you can become a conduit for Spirit. Essentially, I personally like to say, Holy Spirit, move through me. Just move through me. My mind is all yours. The mind is always serving. It's either serving the ego or it's serving the Holy Spirit. So I remind myself, my mind is serving the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, you move through me. And I think you touched on something else, and it was just what healing actually is. All of the sicknesses, the relationship challenges, work challenges, whatever it might be, whatever creates a reaction in us of fear, that is, our stepping stone home to God. But what we also need to recognize is that we need to heal our minds, because a lot of people ask, well, then why don't I just wake up? If it's just a dream, why don't I just wake up? Well, you're not ready for it. We made this world. We believe in it. We've invested in it. And if we were to become enlightened right away, we would be terrified. And so what healing actually is, according to A Course in Miracles, all those things that we're healing are really preparing the mind for God, so that we won't feel guilt. We won't feel shame when we connect with God. We'll actually know that we're worthy of it. We're deserving of it, but it's our inheritance as well. So that's what healing with A Course in Miracles is. All of these little things, even though they seem minuscule to you or really mundane, like, oh my goodness, the same old argument, la 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 la. But no, that's very important. It's a stepping stone home. It's preparing your mind for love. So that's exactly what we're doing when we're healing with A Course in Miracles. That's genuine healing.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, so now we want to talk about where sickness comes from. So as healing is of the mind, sickness is also, it begins in the mind. So specifically that guilt over the tiny mad idea. And all of that guilt is held at the level of the unconscious mind, and then it surfaces, it bubbles up through the subconscious mind, and we experience it in the conscious mind, which the conscious mind is this physical world. And so we want to heal that guilt and recognize that it is at a very unconscious level. But what's very powerful for us to recognize is that when we're in the conscious mind, when we wake up and we go about our day, that is when we can choose to heal. That is when we can choose to practice true forgiveness or any of the corrective affirmations presented to us in the Course. So when we're awake going throughout our day, that is a very powerful place to be. It doesn't need to be ego mode. It can be healing mode. So I just wanted to touch on that, it's a very important place to be. Also, so sickness itself, we're taught in A Course in Miracles that it stems from confusion of the levels. So what I mean by that is we have the level of cause, which is the mind, and we have the level of effect. And effect includes the body, the physical world, and the physical universe as a whole. And so when sickness arises from putting the emphasis on the effect, and so what is being really said there is that you're starting to put your mind's power by focusing on the effect, that things can be done to you, that sickness happened to you, something happened to you. And the ego loves this because what it's really saying, the ego, is saying you're a victim. And if you're a victim, then you're powerless. You're not a decider. You're not a chooser. You're vulnerable. You're very vulnerable in a very scary world. That's what the ego is trying to tell us. But that's actually not the truth. So when we put ourselves at the level of the effect, things are seem to be coming at us, when actually things are coming from us. They're being projected from our minds. And so when it comes to healing, we want to focus back on the cause, the mind, and then the effect begins to change. That's how it really works. So sickness comes from confusing the levels and putting the effect first, when it doesn't actually work that way.
So there's so much to say here.
Oh,
Are we going to, I don't want to jump into this now if you're saving it for later, but just the piece about not feeling guilty about using magic.
Yeah, throw it in there. Like, just let's.
I want to throw it out there now, because I'm just feeling like, again, for anybody who's new and is listening to this idea that, you know, sickness is coming from the mind, healing comes from the mind. Well, what does that mean then? Like, I have all these medicines that I'm taking that are supposedly helping me.
Yeah.
And it goes back actually to what you said before about if we were to just wake up, like if we were to experience the full-blown power of a miracle, which is a full expression of love, if we were to experience that, that could actually, if we're not ready for it, it could precipitate us into panic, is what the Course says. So it says, use medicine, use magic is what it calls it. And, you know, because it's where you are. So I am a big proponent of allowing yourself to be where you are at. We believe in these things. We believe that they work. I fully recommend that you don't stop anything cold turkey because you're like, I'm going to use my mind to heal now. You have to grow into this. My thing has always been, so for instance, when I was in heavy duty anxiety and taking medication, I didn't take medicine the first time I broke down with panic attacks in college, because I knew then if I started it, I would never go off of it. I would be way too afraid to ever stop it. So back then I went through it, you know, I white knuckled my way through it. When I went through another adult episode in 2009, at that point, I chose to use medication because I knew, number one, I've been through this before. I got through it before. I'm going to do it again. Number two, it can be a temporary support for a while. And number three, I would say, I'm going to take this medicine with the Holy Spirit. And I'm going to trust that my need for it and my belief in it is going to fall away the moment I'm ready to let it go. And that is exactly what happened. There was a day when I was just like, I don't need this anymore. The exact same thing happened when I went through a really bad bout of anxiety-induced insomnia. And I needed sleeping medication because my body did not remember how to sleep. And same sort of thing. I took the sleep medication. This is still around 2009, trusting that I wouldn't need it when I was ready to let it go, because I would take it with the Holy Spirit. And so that is what happened. So I encourage all of us, no matter what external remedy it is that we think that we need, that's fine. Repurpose it. Say in your mind, Holy Spirit, I'm going to repurpose this. I give it to you to help me as a means of awakening, rather than just taking it unconsciously without any thought, taking it with ego, because that's the default. If we're not taking it with Holy Spirit, we're taking it with ego. Rather than the ego using it to simply strengthen my belief in separation, I'm allowing that medicine to be repurposed. I'm going to keep taking it until I get an internal knowing that it has fallen away and, you know, it's not necessarily necessary anymore. So I wanted to add that bit in about medicine.
And it is an excellent point. And, you know, for some of my subscribers, you're aware that I'm recovering from caregivers PTSD, from having taken care of my dog when he was sick for 6 weeks. My startle reflex got overstimulated as I was tending to him multiple times throughout the middle of the night. And it was always a fear response. He'd make a sound and I'd get up. And so lo and behold, I end up with panic disorder. So it's interesting that a few years before, you know, I was able to heal from vertigo using my mind, but this time the panic was so profound in December. It was just panic attacks every morning, a major knot in my stomach. And I'm not one who's for medicine. I prefer a holistic point of view, but that's just my mind. That's what my mind accepts. But, you know, if you need medication, you do. And I remember one panic attack was so strong that I didn't actually even recognize it as fear. I actually thought I had come down with the flu or something. I was just feeling so weak and cold. And I released it to the Holy Spirit, and an idea came to me. I asked my husband to drive over to my parents and grab me an Ativan. And so sure enough, he came back, and I was still hesitant. It sat on the dresser for a few minutes, and I finally got up. I don't know what strength got me out of that bed. And I took the Ativan into the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, and I did not recognize myself. Like, yeah, here I got rosy cheeks. Then I was like gray. I looked like a corpse. And I swear it was not even my hand, the power of my hand, that put that Ativan in my mouth. That was spirit, I swear. And I calmed down, and 20 minutes later, I was having a conversation with my mom, trying to figure out what happened. So there's absolute purpose in medication because, you know, just like those stepping stones to God, we're preparing our minds for that healing. And so if you need something to relax a physical symptom and calm yourself down, that's totally fine. And I needed an Ativan, and that helped me out. And then I was able to focus more and get back in alignment with Holy Spirit. And I had to do it for a full month, right? And that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, absolutely. You know, follow the Holy Spirit in your mind. Absolutely, because you know, those who know Gary Renard, but in those teachings, you know, he says that, you know, air, oxygen is magic, water is magic. You don't stop drinking water, you don't stop breathing. It's okay. Lose the guilt for taking things if you feel you need to. It's okay. Yeah, but again, do it with the Holy Spirit. I always envision Holy Spirit holding my hand.
Yeah, oh, I love that. I love that vision. I also just love to share a couple of things about where sickness comes from, because I always laugh. I want to say coincidentally, and there's no coincidences. In the Course in Miracles study group that I facilitate on Sunday nights, we just read a beautiful section about sickness and where it comes from. And so I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts from this about where sickness comes from. It says, no mind is sick until another mind agrees that they are separate. And thus it is their joint decision to be sick. So, and then the next paragraph begins with, I won't read the whole thing, but it says, do not allow your brother to be sick, for if he is, have you abandoned him to his own dream by sharing it with him? So in other words, what this means, and I'll use an example from my book. So my mom used to get really, really debilitating migraine headaches. And when she would have them, it'd be so hard for me because it'd be so upsetting to see her in so much pain. And I'd just be like, oh, you poor thing. Like, what do I do? Like, I get so upset. Yeah. What I was doing, now the world would say that that's love. You know, the world would say that when we join with somebody in their suffering, that it's the loving thing to do. It shows that we love them. Yeah. But actually, what we're doing is strengthening the mistake. We're strengthening the belief that we're separate bodies, that we are sick, that we are apart from God. We're strengthening that when we join in sickness. And there's a whole section in A Course in Miracles on the use of true empathy. So my ability, so my what the world would say would be empathic or compassionate would be that, like, oh, you poor thing, I feel terrible, and to kind of join in that suffering. True empathy is not joining in the suffering, but instead giving my capacity to be empathic, giving my capacity to join. From the ego would be in suffering. I give that capacity for empathy over to the Holy Spirit. And instead, I'm taught how to side with strength. I'm taught how to side with that person's light, with the truth in them. And again, this is a process. This is not something that, in my experience, just happened. It was slow to kind of take hold, and for me to be like, oh yeah, I'm starting to understand what this means. If sickness comes from an agreement that we're separate, healing has to come from an agreement that we're not separate, that there's no gap between us. And so I'm sharing this piece for anybody who is in relationship with somebody who is sick, or if you're sick, I'll say something about that too. One of the most healing things you can do for that other person, and this doesn't have to be in words, this can be completely in your own mind, is to be willing to see past the picture of sickness, is to be willing to join with the truth in them that is light, that is whole, innocent, not sick, eternal. It's a willingness to join on a different level. Now, if you're the one that has an illness, for instance, for me, for anxiety, when I was in the thick of it, I only told a handful of people, because there were specific people I did not tell, because I knew that they would be like, oh my gosh, you poor thing, what can I do for you? And I did not want that, because that felt to me like they were just joining me in suffering. I wanted somebody to see me as whole. I wanted somebody to see me as well, not join the picture. And so I chose to only tell certain people. And even if there were some people that I did tell, that weren't course students, I would ask them to be my rock. I would essentially ask them to be willing to see me as healthy, as perfect, as whole. And that was the way that I did that, you know, with non-course students, but with the course students who are friends and family in my life, I'd say, you know, I need you to side with the truth and see only the truth. And that's where that line out of my book comes from. My stepdad said to me, the light in you is too bright to fail. He was willing to look past that same thing. I was gray. I was like not able to eat. I was flat out on their couch. And he looked straight past that layer, deep into my eyes, saw that light and joined with me on that level. And that was healing for me. So that sentence, no mind is sick until another mind agrees that they are separate, we can counteract that by reminding ourselves in the mind, I am not separate from you. There is no gap between us. We are one, and we can communicate. Even if that person still seems to be sick, even if we still seem to be sick, we can not judge appearances and still go to that deeper level of joining in the truth.
Yeah, and I love everything you said there. And what's standing out for me is remember that separation idea is what causes sickness. When we join in truth, and that's always done at the level of the mind, because the mind is the only thing that really exists. When we join in truth, that's unifying. Unification is healing. Separateness is not. So remember that it's okay to join at the level of the mind and join with the truth of someone. And, you know, also, I would love to share just a little bit. My brother is going through an incredibly challenging time. And because I'm recovering from the caregiver's PTSD, I can't participate. I participated last summer, and I can't do it. I just can't do it, not this time. And I have had to set a tone of, love, I can't do this for you. But in my mind, and with A Course in Miracles and its teachings, I am seeing the truth in my brother. Whenever I think of him, I literally just say, the light of God is in you, and I see that in you. And that's it. And that's all I can manage right now. And that's okay, because it's just a time. It's just a spot of time. I'll always see the truth in him, and there'll be a time that I'll be able to hold his hand physically. It's not right now, and I don't feel guilty about that. Right? So yeah, absolutely. Unification is healing. And sometimes if you can only manage that at the level of the mind and just doing that in your own personal space, that's okay too. I'm the one doing it right now, and that's okay.
It is okay. It's okay to, if you remember in the moment, that's beautiful. And even if you don't remember in the moment and do it after the fact,
exactly,
it doesn't matter. That counts.
It counts as healing. Absolutely. And always remembering that the mind is one. So as we see others, we see ourselves. And as we see others, we're going to experience ourselves, because the mind is one. There is no separateness, not at the level of the mind. It only appears separate. So also we want to be super cautious how we're seeing other people, because if we're seeing them as suffering and sick, it's not that we're not compassionate. It's not that we don't get them a cup of tea or hold their hand or love them in every possible way that we can. But it's also being super cautious about how we're thinking about them, because as you think about others, you will come to experience yourself. And that is something to be very aware of. Very, very powerful.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, so another powerful topic we wanted to touch on is watching out for the false healing of the ego. So in regard to relationships, of course, it's stated in A Course in Miracles that this can be seen as a truce. Like, okay, shake on it, walk away. In regard to sickness, physical sickness, you know, that can be just like that cold that just always comes back same time or after stress, things like that. So it's kind of those recurrent things, you start to notice them, and you have these ways of, you know, you have the truce, you shake the person's hand, but you still don't love everything in your head. You haven't reconciled it. You haven't practiced true forgiveness. That person's still, you know, you're a bit cautious of them. And in regard to physical sickness, you know, it can be like, oh yeah, that, yeah, no, totally. And you just, you know, you take the medicine, but you don't do anything with the mind. So that, and then the cold goes away because you took the cold medicine. And that's okay. Like, as we talked about, if you need a bit of medicine, that's totally fine. But did you take care of the mind? Because you will experience the false healing of the ego. And I think it's super, super important in regard to healing that we absolutely tend to the mind also as we do the body. We put so much focus on the body, and that's the effect, and that's okay. But so, as I took the Ativan with the Holy Spirit, you took the sleeping medication with the Holy Spirit. And, I was, to get over the panic disorder that I had from the PTSD, I was doing a healing meditation, which I'll share with you guys later on. But I was doing that to help myself after I had taken the Ativan. Just taking those steps to tend to the mind, because that is where the sickness began. Mm-hmm. So you want to be aware of the false healing of the ego.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're talking about this. And I wanted to just give a visual from, and actually I wrote about this in From Anxiety to Love, the idea of a leaky pipe.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Think of an old rusty pipe and it's springing leaks all over. False healing of the ego means that we plug up one pipe because we got the Band-Aid, we got the pill, we're not doing anything with the mind, but we plug up that one hole, and so then another hole springs somewhere else. And then we do the same kind of thing. We find the Band-Aid approach, we plug up that hole, and then another hole springs somewhere else, because we're not getting to the root of the problem, which is our belief that we're separate, which is our belief that we're separate from God. So that's, until, like you said, I love how you said that, that we need to work on the mind. We need to do the mind work, not just take the pill. It's that's super spot on in terms of getting to work to heal our sense of separation. And we do that through practicing the lessons of the Course. There's many, the page 90 prayer in the Foundation for Inner Peace edition, which is also, I know Gary Renard has his, the forgiveness process, which we'll talk about, but it's so important that we're always working at that deep level, because otherwise the fear is just free to come out in some other way. We can welcome it when it does, because it's another opportunity for healing. But I know that miracles save time. And that's what we want. We want to save time. So let's engage at this mind level to save that time.
Absolutely. And as it states in A Course in Miracles, that things are not scary for what they are, but for their hiddenness. So sometimes when we think that's, if that's not speaking to the false healing of the ego, I don't know what is. You thought it was dealt with, you thought it was under the rug or whatever, and then it pops back up again. Right. And in some cases, that's how surprise can get us. It's like, really? I thought I dealt with that. And it's like, did you take care of it at the level of the mind, So,
I can give another very specific healing example with this, where, I was pretty heavily engaged in A Course in Miracles for the first, I don't even know, I think it was like 11 or so years.
Yeah.
And then that's when I had, after that, because, I had panic attacks in college, got into the Course, 10, 11 years went by. Had that adult age episode of anxiety really bad in about 2009. And it was then that I realized that those 10, 11, 12 years where I was dabbling in the Course, I was doing it-ish. But what really started shifting was when I stopped running away from the issue, which was the anxiety.
Right.
Started turning toward it with the Holy Spirit, like literally looking at taking the bull by the horns and literally looking at it in the face, like the panic, the fear, the anxiety that felt like it was just going to crush me. Looking at that, but recognizing that I was not looking at it alone. It was like a blown up, scary looking balloon. It had no power to hurt me whatsoever. And I could look at it with the Holy Spirit and be willing to see it differently. And it was when I stopped running from it in that way that I really started, that was when I decided I needed to start writing a book, because I was starting to be helped so much. And I had to write down even for myself, just what was working. So
nice. Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So do we want to get now into the requirements for healing according to A Course in Miracles? All right. So we already touched on that sickness stems from a reversal of cause and effect, where we put our focus on the effect, not the cause. So you want to watch your levels. So as I was healing from the Meniere's, I was safe to take those 2 months and put the focus on my mind. I felt very safe to do that, and I practiced true forgiveness. I did a beautiful healing meditation.
Would you just describe, that's the first time you mentioned Menyers. I want to make sure everybody knows
Yes.
that little bit that I didn't want to forget in the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just quickly, and you know, this is kind of, it touches on when we're looking to heal something, you really have to trust that the Holy Spirit has your back. So when I was going through the vertigo, a decade before that, I just lost total hearing in my ear. It was always full, and I would always say to my friends, "Oh, speak in my good ear, dear," and, you know, invite them to sit on my left. So when I was healing from the Menyers, and I had to, you know, sorry, what was the question again?
You didn't know it was Menyers.
The Menyers, that's right. So I didn't know it was Menyers. So I was, for so long, I had no idea what was going on. And then the vertigo started to come in. So for about 4 years, I dealt with vertigo, and I had no idea what was going on. I went to 6 different doctors, and they didn't know. There was nothing. They couldn't see anything in my ear. I was left with no answer. But as a Course in Miracles student, I was definitely left with the Holy Spirit. So it didn't prevent me from doing the healing work that I had to do. And it wasn't actually till this year, 3 years after I healed from the vertigo, that I met up with author Lee Carroll. He's a Hay House author, and he's the author of the Cryon books and the first book on indigo children. And I was at an event he was at, and I was having dinner with him and his wife. And I was telling him my beautiful healing story, and he just stopped, and I could tell he was listening to something, and he looked at me and he said, it was Menyers disease. And I went home and I looked at Menyers disease, and check. That is what I had been dealing with the whole time. So it's a nice little reminder that the Holy Spirit will give you the information you need when you need it. Because I think if I had known it was Menyers when I was actually trying to go through it, if anyone's familiar with Menyers, it is known as an incurable disease. It is also known as a very psychologically debilitating disease. And it is actually why Van Gogh cut off his ear. So I think if I had known that, it probably would have intimidated me a bit. So I trusted the Holy Spirit to give me the information I needed when I got it. And
that's, I love that story so much, because it speaks so strongly to ditching labels. Like whatever disease you think you have, whatever disease the doctors have told you that you're living with or somebody else is living with, that is just putting on layers of fear that we then accept that, oh, it's this thing, it's going to be like this forever.
Right.
No, like don't accept it into your holy mind. You reject it. Say, I do not want this. I am rejecting this label. You know, I give this over, and I'm just willing to keep at this. I'm willing to keep at this work, because I agree with you that labels like that can be incredibly limiting and debilitating when we're given those labels. And what a beautiful example that that 3 years after you healed, you figured out what that had been.
Yeah, I found out. And you know, that is where we really need to trust what is said in A Course in Miracles, is that you will be told everything you need to know. Yeah, so don't worry about it. Try not to worry about that. Try practicing going, I'll be told. Holy Spirit, I trust you. The messengers of love that are all around me, I'll be told if I need to know anything. And in the meantime, I'm going to focus on the true healing. Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing this. I interrupted your flow. So
all good, love. You're all good. So we want to put cause and effect in the right place, put the focus back on the minds, and come from cause. We've touched on that many, many times, and that's all good. And then another part, one of the requirements for healing for the Course is the acceptance of the holy instant. So chapter 15, I encourage you to read it. It's a beautiful chapter all about the holy instant in regard to relationships, in regard to littleness versus magnitude. And there are just so many beautiful excerpts from there. I swear, in my thing of the Course, it's just underlined. But in the holy instant is essentially that moment when you choose to lose the ego agenda. And like, that's what I did on the stairs when I looked at the Buddha. I lost my ego agenda. I just knew whatever. I just wanted God. That was it. And that was beautiful, and it worked perfectly for me. So in the holy instant in which you see yourself as bright with freedom, you will remember God. And surely that is what I experienced, and it definitely, that was a holy instant for me. And, you know, it is stated, Jesus states in the Course that, you know, you don't always experience it, and certainly, you know, it takes some mind training to get there. But there are two specific times in that chapter where he says, practice accepting the holy instant. Practice trying it. And so it's up to us to kind of practice, you know, that kind of Eckhart Tolle, the power of now kind of experience, right? It is just practice seeing yourself and others totally free of the past. Because if you keep focusing on the past as our mind works, it's just getting projected further into the future, and you're going to get more of the same. So in the holy instant, you're releasing yourself and everyone else from the conflict, the pain, the past, which is all we know because we made it. It's all we remember. And if we're asking for healing, we're asking for the Holy Spirit's version of the future, or the eternal holy instant. So we have to move forward with him. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I just want to emphasize what you said, the holy instant. It says something to the effect in the Course, and I'm seeing it here on our outline, that we simply lay aside all judgment of yourself, others, and the world.
Yeah.
And think about how often we are judging like crazy. We judge like that all the time, incessantly, constantly. So this, again, is where this vigilance comes in for watching our minds, where our minds are going, and at least being willing to not judge, at least being willing to catch ourselves when we do judge, and go into that space instead of, I don't know what anything is freaking for. You know, I think I do.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want it good and this is bad, but let me come back. You know, all of my interpretation is not going to bring about a holy instant. All of my interpretation is not going to bring about a healing. Totally. It's me letting go of all of my interpretations and opening up to the fact that I know nothing, to have an experience of truth rise up within me. And that's at the space in which the holy instant is born. Absolutely. So it's literally about this moment to moment practice of non-judgment, not beating ourselves up for when we do judge, because we're going to do it all the time. But I often share this story on our study group where I had you know, the Course talks about how, like, if you look really closely, you can like trace back where, you know, something, maybe you're having some sort of manifestation of some sort of problem or issue, and you can kind of trace it back to the misthought. This happened one time so clearly for me because there was something happening in our world about a year ago politically that I did not agree with. It was very upsetting to me. And I knew a group of people who supported it and agreed with it. And I judged them harshly. Quickly forgot that I had judged them. And a day or two passes, and suddenly I'm having this day, and I like to say I don't have bad days anymore. Of course I have days that are challenging, but I don't label it as a bad day anymore. Totally. It's always an opportunity to grow. It's always an opportunity to turn to the Holy Spirit. So this particular day, though, literally everything I touched broke, fell to the floor. I dropped my morning smoothie all over the kitchen floor. A squirrel, we were growing peaches on these newly planted peach trees, and a squirrel knocked every single fresh peach off of the tree. So literally everything that could go wrong this day went wrong. My husband, I was going to visit him at where he was working, and as I was en route, halfway there, he called me, and he was on his way home. He got off work early. So like literally,
just missed each other.
What's going on? Like what is happening? My day is just so out of sync and unusual. And my mind was led back to that judgment that I went into of those other people. And I thought, whoa, there is the mistake that I made. I'm willing. I still don't agree with it, but I'm willing to see this differently. I'm willing to, you know, to see the light, to forgive the whole situation, to hand my thoughts, my judgments over to Holy Spirit. And as I did that, I had to go for a walk to kind of like burn off the extra steam that I had, but the rest of the day then smoothed out and kind of turned into like how it normally goes. So the piece about watching our minds and not going to judgment is huge. It's huge. It's huge.
It's massive, because you have to lose that ego agenda. All of your judgments, all that you thought you made, just let it go. Just let it go. And as we practice it, we're only going to be able to do that for maybe a few seconds. But that is the beginning. And I think it's also helpful to recognize that enlightenment is inevitable. Healing is inevitable. So you're going to do this work somehow and in some way. So, the title of this webinar, it's My Time to Heal. Why not start now? As we're posed the question so many times in the course, why delay your happiness? You have no idea the miracles that are waiting for you. I just picture them as little dots all around us, just ready to boom, and just be there for us. Yeah, that potential, the healing potential is massive, because healing is not of the ego. It's of God. And it's natural. So we need to allow it. Yep.
Boom. Yes. Can I add one more thing about requirements for healing? And this has been something that's been so helpful for me, is this idea of taking radical responsibility for my experience, for everything that's showing up in my experience. So like you said before about not being a victim, when we decide I'm no longer going to be a victim, we step into a place of power. We can choose again. That's a good thing to say, that it's a good thing to say I'm taking responsibility for all of my experience, for all of it, because then we're in that place where we can choose again.
Exactly.
And the course actually says, this is in the same section that I just read from. It's in chapter 28. I'm in the CE edition, the Circle of Atonement edition. When we take the effects back to the cause of, when we stop messing up cause and effect, when we start to say, what's happening out there is not causing me to feel X, Y, or Z, but somehow, I don't understand how, the mind is causing out there. When we start embracing that, even if we don't understand it, I still don't even know if I understand it. It says the mind, when we say, this is not done to me, but I am doing this, the mind is free to make another choice instead. Beginning here, salvation will proceed to change the course of every step in the descent to separation until all the steps have been retraced, the ladder gone, and all the dreaming of the world undone. So just like you said, enlightenment is inevitable. When we begin, everybody who's here, we're here for a reason, because we were called into this work, even if we're brand new into this. When we start making these different choices, we're setting in motion an interlocking chain of forgiveness, as the Course says, an interlocking chain of miracles, that as we continue with this work, it's leading us to that place of enlightenment. That's where we're all going.
Absolutely. Really, absolutely. And you need to trust that, the development of trust. But like, as I said in the beginning, as you commit to the healing work and just give it a whirl, just give it a go, you'll be given the evidence that you need, that this is true, that it works. So don't worry about what's going on with other people. If you're inspired by someone, great. But I really encourage everyone to try implementing the Course lessons and the true forgiveness process, the page 90 exercise. Try implementing it yourself. Give it a whirl. Absolutely. You're worth it. Absolutely. So before we take some questions, do we have questions, Eric? Yeah, okay, awesome. I just wanted to touch quickly that, Corinne and I have already mentioned the page 90 exercise. So it is, I must have decided wrongly because I am not at peace. I made the decision myself, but I can also decide otherwise. I choose to decide otherwise because I want to be at peace. I do not feel guilty because the Holy Spirit will undo all the consequences of my wrong decision if I will let Him. I choose to let Him by letting Him choose for God, for me. That is a beautiful prayer. Connection to God, connection to your right mind. If you're wondering how you can connect with your right mind, stop judging and simply say something like that. And that is how you activate the Holy Spirit in your mind and hand things over to judge Him, or for Him to judge for you. And for some who are fans of Gary Renard, I know not everyone is, but for those who are, his book, Love Has Forgotten No One, on page 79, there is a healing meditation which I used to heal from the Meniere's disease, and I used it to heal from the panic disorder. So once I found out that I had panic disorder and I was feeling calm enough, I implemented that healing meditation And in 3 days, the panic disorder was gone. It was just gone. And I haven't had panic since. I've had maybe a few stressful moments, but the panic attacks are just gone. So I really encourage you to look up the healing meditation. It is something I do almost every single night to maintain my health.
That's so powerful, Fiona. Can you just like give us some brief points from it really quick?
For sure, absolutely. So essentially you want to connect with the Holy Spirit. Think about what it is that you're trying to focus on for healing. So for me, I focused on the labyrinth of my inner ear, and then also the panic. So I actually envisioned my central nervous system when I was doing the panic. So you envision that area, and then you start to remind yourself that your mind is the cause, everything else is an effect, that the body is a projection of your mind. You don't need to react to it. You can actually just use your mind. You also want to remind yourself of your innocence, which is so important, because remember, the only reason we're experiencing things like this is because we feel guilty. And so we want to get in touch with our innocence and remind ourselves that the guiltless mind cannot suffer, and really start to feel it. I encourage you to feel each one of these steps. The next step would then be to remember that God only ever loves you and wants to take care of you. And I envision just like a big hug coming from behind, and I kind of just melt into it. It's so beautiful. And then, and this whole thing only needs to take like 10 minutes. It's not a lot of time, but don't do it laying down. You'll fall asleep. And then the final thing that you do is then envision and welcome the Holy Spirit to fill your body with his healing white light, or whatever color you prefer. And then I actually like envisioned the labyrinth of my inner ear just like whoosh, filled with white light. With the panic disorder, I envisioned like my brain and the whole central nervous system being filled with the white light of the Holy Spirit. So that's the steps really quick. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I want to, in case people don't have the book, and I hope that they'll get it, but that I wanted them to have that snippet of what your process is.
Okay, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And then also the true forgiveness process is also in Gary Renard's work, and it is touched upon, of course, in the page 90 exercise. And so essentially the true forgiveness process is 3 quick steps. So when I was healing from the Meniere's, I would just quickly, like if I had a symptom or I felt fearful, so what you do is you just recognize that you're in fear because you've been thinking with the ego. And that's the power position you were talking about. It's my mind. I can change my mind. Step 2, switch. I switch it over to the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, you judge this fearful reaction for me. You judge the symptom for me, because I don't know how to judge. And I actually say that to myself. I don't know how to do it. I give it up. And then the third step is acceptance of the atonement. And it is this particular step that I really invite you to feel, because accepting the atonement is, I never left my Father. I love him. I'm at home in him right now. He loves me. And I really just feel that love envelop me. And it can just be like a few seconds, whatever you can manage. But that's the true forgiveness process. And that heals all of the guilt at the level of your unconscious mind. Yeah. So that's what I also used to heal from Meniere's and panic disorder, and also the PTSD.
Awesome.
Yep.
Wow.
Yes. And then also, just quickly before we take some questions, we wanted to touch upon the importance of willingness. So of course, this is something that both Corinne and I have said throughout the webinar, but again, because you are in the power position and because the Holy Spirit is alive and well in your right mind, all you have to do is touch on your willingness and just go, maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's something different for me. Maybe I'm willing to let that conflict go, or that pain, or just to see this differently. What if I'm willing to learn? So your willingness is essential to you. It's the essential first step, right? So I'm like, if you're not willing, then just give it a spell. So get to a better feeling place, and then you'll be willing. It's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to cry and, be angry and whatever. It's okay. But just get to a better feeling place, and then you'll find yourself willing again. It's okay. Absolutely.
And if you're not willing, good for you for being honest that you're not willing. Totally. And then ask yourself, am I willing to be willing? And if you're not willing to be willing, are you willing to be willing to be willing? You can
totally.
You find that tiny speck of willingness, and that tiny speck of willingness is all you need to bring about this interlocking cascade of miracles, of healing that you're calling forth in your willingness. Willingness is the precursor for change of all kinds, for healing everything. So it's all it's critical. Our willingness is critical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So are we ready for some questions?
Let's dive in.
All right. So this is from Stacy about the insomnia and anxiety. So she's experiencing insomnia and anxiety. She tries to accept and trust, but finds it impossible to let go of the fear. The side effects of the sleep meds remind her of fear. So do you have any suggestions?
So can you say again one more time, accepting, what was it about accepting and trusting?
She tries to accept and trust, but finds it impossible to let go of the fear. And the side effects of the sleep medications are reminding her of fear.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, the side effects of medications can, sleep medications or any medication too, that can be rough. Yeah. Now, I want to say first, with trying to accept and trust, you don't have to do it perfectly. Like it doesn't, we can't just like master this. It's a gradual thing that we learn as we develop trust. Mm-hmm. So I want to say, first of all, accept yourself where you are at. Self-acceptance, letting yourself be where you are, fully accepting, okay, like, this is where I am. For me, was so critical, because if I got into thinking, which is so easy to do, I should be further along, I shouldn't be feeling this way, that's like just another block. It's just another little ego trap that we can fall in. So first, I would say, can you be okay with the fact that you feel like you are trying to accept and trying to trust and feeling like you're not doing it? And can you accept that it feels impossible to let go of the fear? Can you just let yourself be okay with that right now? And it doesn't mean we're going to stay there. But again, that acceptance of where we're at is key to move forward. So you also don't have to let go of the fear, like perfectly. So if it feels impossible because it feels too big, that I would encourage you to go to that page 90 prayer. So we're referring to page 90 in the Foundation for Inner Peace edition. It starts with the sentence, I must have decided wrongly because I am not at peace. It says in there that the Holy Spirit will undo the consequences of my wrong decision if I will let him, and I choose to let him by allowing him to decide for God for me. So in other words, I'm not deciding for God of myself. I'm letting the Holy Spirit do the deciding for me. I don't really know how to let go of fear perfectly, but I can call on the Holy Spirit. So I would encourage you, rather than feeling like you have to let fear go, when it's this like white knuckle like feeling, just start talking to the Holy Spirit. Just start saying, Holy Spirit, I'm willing to let go of this fear. If you have not checked out the podcast that I did, it's called Sleep Solutions for Anxious Peeps, I think. It's one of my more recent podcasts. Please listen to that, because I give a number of recommendations in that podcast for insomnia, one of which is, when you're not sleeping, accepting that you're not sleeping. Because I used to get very upset that I wasn't sleeping, and that was just making everything worse. So please listen to that. There's a bunch of suggestions, which I won't totally review here, but definitely listen to that. The other piece that I wanted to say is that if you can identify your fears, so if it feels impossible to let go of the fear, what fear are you referring to? Write it down, and write down as many fears as you can on paper. And one by one, say, Holy Spirit, I'm willing to look at this with you. Or Holy Spirit, I give this to you. One by one, because the more we can get those fears out and identify them and get clear that we're handing each one over, the less of a chokehold it feels like the fear has over us. So
bring it to the light.
Yeah.
And also, Stacy, when I was recovering from the panic disorder, and panic disappeared, but I had the reminders, and because I woke up with such knots in my stomach, after the couple months after, I was finding that I couldn't have my green tea, because which I love green tea, but green tea, it kind of call it green tea tummy, where it can kind of make your tummy a little gurgly and a little upset, which was just something I used to suck up because I love green tea. I actually stopped drinking my green tea because it was reminding me of the fear that I felt so potently in December. So I want you to know that healing meditation that I touched upon was something that Again, I do it every evening with absolute trust and conviction to heal my mind. It is the Holy Spirit that heals your mind, and that is a beautiful meditation which opens your mind up for healing, and you go to sleep knowing that the Holy Spirit is going to heal your mind. Also, I want to warn you that if you do that meditation, you might have some dreams, some nightmares, because the Holy Spirit works with us also in the sleeping dream. And just forgive them. When you wake up, also practice true forgiveness on the sleeping dreams that you're having. I've had a lot of dreams with the PTSD that I've had to forgive. So that really helped me to dissolve the reminders of fear that I had experienced from the PTSD. Also, I encourage everyone, I'll send out a link when I send out the replay. There's also another meditation that is given to us in the course, and the Song of Prayer. And it's also given to us. Gary Renard recorded it on YouTube. That is also another incredible meditation where you're giving everything on the altar over to the Holy Spirit. So it's kind of the same idea, but these are two really beautiful meditations to help support you, Stacy, in dissolving that fear. It might take a bit of time, but I trust that the healing will occur because you're actually doing the right thing with it. You're giving it over to the Holy Spirit where it belongs. So that helped me as well.
And I just want to highlight too that if, I just want to clarify again, because I come from a formerly very anxious, fearful mind. And so I could take what you said about the nightmares might kick up. Yeah. Remember, it's not the Holy Spirit doing that at all. No. That's just the ego being like, let's amp up the fear so we can keep your attention and you won't try to keep looking to the light. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, very cool. Absolutely. Yeah. And also from Kylie, we have, how do I deal with envy? Have had chronic illnesses for years, and I am inspired by healing stories, but I feel envy and frustration because she's been doing ACIM for so long and she is still ill. So Kylie, I don't know what illness you're going through, but if you want to email me, fiona@fionamaria.ca, and I would definitely love to send you some links and some support there. But I guess, is the envy about other people who experience healing? If you also want to let me know that, I would definitely be, absolutely, I'm here to help. And then I understand the frustration where you see other people healing or getting the course and you're just not. So Corinne, I'm sure you can understand that for sure. And I think it is important to recognize that some physical experiences are so much more challenging than others. And again, that comparison is of the ego. So we want to watch ourselves when we're comparing ourselves to others, because comparison is the seed of conflict. And so, ask the Holy Spirit to, you can take that as your first step to just go, I am willing to stop comparing. I'm very frustrated, experiencing envy. Holy Spirit, can you help me with these feelings? And it might start to open up, just some healing processes for you about what you're really experiencing. But do know that comparison is a very detrimental thing to our mental health. And it's an ego ploy for sure. So, but yes, Kylie, please email me, and I would be very, very happy to offer more support in any way that I can. Yeah.
Awesome. And I'll add, Kylie, because that's such a great question. Yeah. Comparison is also the thief of joy. I believe Eleanor Roosevelt said that. Comparison is the thief of joy. Yeah. It will suck joy out of you so fast.
Yeah.
Comparison is an absolute ego trap. So I really want to build upon what Fiona said with being willing to get out of that comparison place. Yeah. A couple other things come to mind. Number one, you can ask yourself this and look at this with radical honesty with the Holy Spirit. What are your expectations of what your life should look like because you're a course student? Yeah. Oftentimes we think like, oh, I'm a course student, now everything's going to be okay. Now the world is going to be, happy, shiny, and, I'm going to heal and everything's going to be fine because I'm doing this Course in Miracles. Yeah. Those expectations can get in our way of experiencing miracles, because what is that but the ego mind deciding what the external form should look like? It's now attributing power to the external form, and external form is the body also, because the body is external to us. So if we are deciding what the external picture should look like, because now we're doing this cool thing called the Course in Miracles, that is going to be a block that's going to get in our way. So I encourage you to look at your expectations and look at those without judgment, without guilt, without blame, but look at them with the Holy Spirit. And I would also add to be willing to practice seeing past the picture. So despite physical challenges staying in place, can you be willing to still see the truth beyond? Can you be willing to still see past the picture? Because that is where the work, the deep work and the deep healing can happen, when we can have experiences, literal experiences of something beyond this world of form that show us that there's a lot more happening than what our body's eyes see. So again, could you be willing, and you could talk about this with the Holy Spirit, write about it. Would you be willing, despite appearances exactly as they are, to still, be okay seeing past it? And you can ask the Holy Spirit for help in that journey and that process. So thank you, Kylie. My heart goes out to you.
Yeah. And there's a lovely comment. John says to ask Kylie to ask the Holy Spirit to help her choose again.
I love that.
Absolutely. And then we got another question before the webinar from Maya. Maya was wondering, in regard to vertigo, I know there might be other people wondering about the vertigo, if there was anything else that I did along with the true forgiveness and the healing meditation. No, there isn't. And I didn't know, like I said, that I had Meniere's. So there weren't any supplements or any exercises that I did other than the mental work. And also because when I went to the doctors weren't seeing anything like crystals in my ears. So if you go to the doctor and the doctor's seeing crystals then in your ears, which causes vertigo, they'll give you some physiotherapy exercises to do. So yeah, like I said, mine was Meniere's. So there was nothing else that I did other than surrender to the Holy Spirit, which was great. But follow the guidance that the Holy Spirit is giving you in your mind, and you will be guided to the right thing. And if your doctor can support you and suggest you go to an ear, nose, and throat, they just might be able to see more than a regular doctor can, those specialists, because the inner ear is quite a labyrinth. Yeah, absolutely. And
I was joking with Fiona when we were talking earlier today, when she was talking about, the inner ear being so complex. And I was like, oh, you're talking to a girl who got seasick, got motion sickness in a float tank. So if you know those, it's like very buoyant salt water and it's a bathtub. I got motion sickness from trying, laying in a bathtub. I get the complex inner ear thing.
Yeah, totally. And it's Corinne and I were also saying the importance of laughter. I know when we face challenges, they're super hard. They can be super deep. But when you can start to relax a little bit and you start to see things with the Holy Spirit, you will be able to laugh again. And I was telling Corinne that the last bout of vertigo that I had, I was down for the count on the couch, and I actually cracked a joke to my husband, Eric, and we were laughing. And, you're going to experience things, and that's okay. But when you do it with the Holy Spirit, you can always decide how you view those things. And I do encourage more laughter, because things hurt because we take them seriously.
And if I could just add to that too, there's a lesson in the Course that says sickness is a defense against the truth.
Right.
And to the ego mind, or if we're a new Course student, we might be like, what? Sickness is a defense against the truth. Come on. I don't want to be sick. But take that and hold that with laughter, just like you're saying. There's been more than one occasion when I've had a cold and I've facilitated my Sunday night study group, and I'm like, I'm defending against the truth right now. Joke out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I can own it. So however, sickness as it shows up in our experience is just the ego putting forth its best ditch effort to keep you convinced that you're a body. That's all it is. It's the ego saying, look, it hurts. It's got to be real. You know,
You're separate.
You're separate. There's a Course quote that says, nothing so blinding as perception of form. Yeah. So think about that. Nothing so blinding as perception of form. Yeah. And especially when that form is painful, it's blinding. And that is the exact purpose of it. That's exactly why it's there, to blind ourselves to what's beyond the form. So if we can start bringing in that laughter again and saying like, I'm defending against the truth right now. And just like, you know, having that, you know, lighthearted attitude, that can be really helpful.
It can be. It's helpful for your attitude. It's helpful for your state of mind. And you know, I know we're not going to feel that way all the time, but if you can manage it, if you can put on a funny movie, or, you know, try and smile a little more, you know, you're worth it. Bring around the things that you find beautiful, fresh flowers, take care of yourself, love yourself. You're worth it. You're going to do a lot better if you are genuine with yourself about what you need and bring about what makes you happy. What are the things that help you think lovingly, right? Sunshine, vitamin D, an animal, the color pink, I don't know, but it's okay. Use it. Yeah.
And even how we hold ourselves too. I'll be interviewing somebody for my podcast soon who had this amazing opening by shifting her posture from like, you know, like upset and closed to like, I'm open, like my heart is open, like that, just that tiny little shift in our posture can also make us feel different too.
Yeah. I'm cognizant of the time because I don't know if it's just going to shut down in a few seconds because I timed it for the 2.5, but I just want to say thank you everyone so much for joining us. Hey, it's still on. Okay, we're doing great. Hey, let's continue. Sorry, I was just like super aware that it might shut down on me. Okay, if that's the case, then I actually, there's another question in the chat from Teska. I'd like to ask about how to work with a therapist who isn't a course student. Are there any resources to help therapists understand ACIM well enough to help me heal with HS? I know what you mean. When I was going through the PTSD, I had a lovely psychologist and that I would just bounce things off of. She very much honored my spiritual thought system, and I was just very honest about that. And so she held a space where, although she was not spiritual, she definitely honored it and made me feel safe in it. But always remember that the Holy Spirit, Teska, is again in your mind. You can invite, Corinne actually shared this story with me when she helped me so much when I was going through the panic. She sent me a beautiful interview that she had done. And remember, Corinne, where we go in, when we go out into the world, and if we're nervous about something like an appointment or something, we can ask for messengers of love, that this person be a messenger of love. And that really rang true for me, and that really helped me. So Teska, when you go to see your therapist, you can ask the Holy Spirit, please may this person be a messenger of love. And the Holy Spirit will speak through them and move through them in a way that'll make sense for you. So that is what I'd recommend. And of course, I mean, if you're gonna flat out go, do you know A Course in Miracles? You should check it out. You know, what resonated with you? What helped it make sense with you? What are you willing to share with them? You can follow that intuition with yourself. But yeah, absolutely. Our therapists are beautiful people to help us get things up and out in a safe way, in a safe manner, and the Holy Spirit absolutely does work through them. And so I just invite you to, you know, invite the Holy Spirit to be with you in that conversation and ask for that messenger of love. That's personally how I deal with it. Yeah,
that's beautiful. And I would also add that you can coach your therapist in terms of how they can best support you as a course student. So if they have no idea about A Course in Miracles, yes, do everything that Fiona just said. I love what you said, Fiona, about those messengers of love and recognizing that the Holy Spirit can speak through other people if we're feeling too blocked. But if there are specific ways that you feel like you want your therapist to support you, like asking you, are you checking in with the Holy Spirit? You can say to your therapist, I want you to remind me to ask the Holy Spirit, and they can do that. So you can coach them how they can best support you. And like the example that I gave early on in the webinar, where I only told certain people because I knew that they'd be willing to see the truth in me still and not be like, oh, I feel so bad for you. My therapist was one of the people that I told because I knew that the therapist wasn't going to like lie down next to me and be like crying on the floor next to me.
Right.
And that's not their job. So, so coaching them. And, you know, obviously if you were able to find, I don't have any resources off the top of my head that are brief introductions to the course. I'm sure there's many forms of that online, but you could always give a printout and be like, just so you know, this is what I'm into. And these are just some of the basic principles. And,
Absolutely. And we got a comment from Deidre Stats. She says that she knows many therapists who have ACIM as a background as well. So Deidre, if you would be willing to send me those names or any contact information you have, and I'd be very, very happy to send that out.
Deidre is one of them. I'm just saying.
Yes. Oh, beautiful. So I would be very, very happy to include that in the replay email that I send out. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Do we have any more questions? No? Okay, we're doing great. Yay! So I hope that this is truly helpful for everyone. Like I said, the purpose of this webinar was, I guess, to kind of light a little fire under all of our arses to, you know, to heal. And I think I wanted to share it because it's been, the past few years have been super trying for me, and that's okay. And the healing I've experienced, I just want to shout it from the rooftops. And I want you to let you know that it is possible. And not only that, that you're worth your commitment to think with the Holy Spirit. So I definitely feel that that's important for you to know, because this work is going to come from your invitation to the Holy Spirit. Yeah.
It is. And we're in this together. So our healing is for you. Your healing is for us. As you're healed, as the Course says, as you are healed, you are not healed alone. So literally we are all in this work together. Anxiety, pain, sickness can be so convincing in lying to us and making us think that we're the only one in the world facing this. We're the only one in the world that feels this way. We're the only one in the world who's not getting the Course. Those are ego lies. We're not alone in this. We all, you know, have experienced really dark, challenging times. And I just picture us like linking arms, holding hands, like climbing up that ladder together. So I thank everybody for the work that you are doing, for being here.
Absolutely. And we actually have one more question that came around on Facebook from Rachel. Hello, ladies. I'm just wondering, how do we deal not just with our own healing, but with the healing of other people? In other words, if someone we know is sick but doesn't follow the Course, how do we offer this way of healing without offending or without seeming that we are not compassionate towards their feelings? Absolutely. And we touched a bit on that earlier. You know, so like my brother and what he's going through a super challenging time. And so what's helping me, you know, of course, if you're able to hug and hold the hand and love them and support them, that's beautiful. But remember that, Rachel, that it is so important how you think about them. So all I can manage right now is seeing my brother as the light of God, which is actually a true gift. And, you know, of Course in Miracles, it states that when a brother behaves insanely, see sanity in him. Sometimes all that we can do is just think correctly, and we don't need to let them know that. You know, A Course in Miracles is a very personal self-study course, and it is just something that we hold within ourselves, and that we're able to demonstrate it, like in this platform, with others and speak very clearly about it. In other ways, it is just purely at the level of the mind, and that's just where it remains. But that's perfect, because that's where everything stems from, and that's where the correction stems from. So you don't need to articulate everything. And if they don't understand, like I don't think my brother understands what I've been through over the past year, I don't need him to understand. It's okay. I'm confident in what I've been dealing with, my relationship with the Holy Spirit, that when I'm ready to be there in a bigger way, I will. I don't need that validation. I don't need him to understand, or whatever that's looking like for you, Rachel. I hope the person's understanding, or whatever it might be, but just trust that it's always and forever what you're thinking about them, because that is the content that will be real for you in your mind.
I love that question, Rachel. And I will also add that I don't remember where I heard this story, but it was some author whose wife was dying of cancer, and they had to kick the Course in Miracles students out of the house. Like, they had to be like, okay, Course in Miracles students, you can't come visit my wife anymore because you keep saying things like, oh, you're choosing for this, and like, this is guilt in your mind and you can choose again. Not helpful. Like, that is so the opposite of loving. That's unloving. We are not asked to correct our brother. The Course says specifically, do not correct your brother.
Yeah, no.
If we're seeing mistakes in another person's ego, we must be seeing through our own. So the work comes back to me. It comes back to us in our own mind. So I love this question, because how you can be most helpful in those circumstances, maybe you would be guided. You have to ask the Holy Spirit in those moments, is what it comes down to. You have to ask the Holy Spirit. Maybe you'll be guided to have certain words, but it might just be in your mind, like Fiona was just saying, you hold that space in your heart that this is my brother who I love. This is the Holy Son of God. I'm willing to see the light, the truth in you, and just hang on to that, rather than feeling like you have to make it better for them some way, through words. Because we are asked to be miracle workers, miracles, again, in addition to those being shifts in perception, miracles are expressions of love. And it can be incredibly unloving to say something to someone before they are ready. Like, this idea of like taking radical responsibility for everything that we're experiencing, we have to come to that ourselves. We have to individually come to resonate and integrate that. You can't throw that at somebody. Like, that's just blaming the victim when you throw it at somebody, So I love that question, and ask the Holy Spirit, and it can be all internal.
Yeah. And even Jesus says in the Course, that we can ask if something needs to be said, but that more often than not, the answer is no. and that's okay, and it is just really just like, oh, all right, I'm not required here in any other way. To be a gentle smile, and a teacher of God. We're all teachers of God, and sometimes being a teacher of God is just that gentle smile and just that knowingness in your heart, in your mind, that you know who that person really is. And that is so therapeutic, again, because all correction, all healing is done at the level of the mind. So never doubt the power of right-minded thoughts, because the power of the mind is so strong. And I always say to people, if you doubt the power of your mind, then reflect upon moments of anger, of fear, of sadness, and how they have absolutely crippled us to the point that we are just laying on the ground, right? That's the power of your mind. So what if you switched? What if you practice thinking with the Holy Spirit and create what I like to call the God habit? What if you started thinking with God more often, and then that beautiful power of your mind is being used to uplift you and remind you, and then you're reminding others. It's incredible. Yeah, we're demonstrators. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I always say we're all walking down the catwalk. Like, people are watching. People are hearing. They're listening. So what are you demonstrating, right? What are you demonstrating? Yeah. Yes. So I wanted to thank everyone so much, and also just because this is a purely informational webinar, it's just love, and I wanted to add more love, that I have a True Healing course, and if you would like it, I am giving it away for free. I just want people to heal. So if you are interested in the True Healing course, just email me, fiona@fionamaria.ca, and it is yours for a lifetime.
That's awesome, Fiona. That's
because
awesome.
Healing's natural and we all deserve it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yay.
Um,
And I want to say just again, thank you, Fiona, for pulling this together. It's been absolutely glorious and amazing. For everybody who's still here, thank you all for just holding the space, because again, as you accept these healing ideas, as you accept the teachings of the Course into your mind, making this shift of mind, it helps all of us. It's strengthening the ideas in my mind as you do the work, and vice versa. And so I'm just so incredibly grateful to everyone who is showing up and spreading their light in the world.
And you are. You, each and every one of you are the light of the world.
Yes.
You deserve to know that.
Yes. Yes. Amen to that. Yay.
Thank you, Corinne, for taking the time to join me as my guest.
So fun.
Always so inspirational. Thank you, everyone, for your love and your support, and for showing up and for being in this world with me. I really appreciate it.
So much love.
Thank you, everyone. You'll be sent the replay. You'll be sent the link to the Gary Renard webinar on YouTube, which I highly recommend for healing. If Deidre Stats can give me the info for the therapists that are ACIM minded, then you'll also be sent that as well. And also, if you are interested again in my True Healing course, then please send me an email and it will be yours.
Awesome. You know, you just inspired me to add that the From Anxiety to Love meditations, my whole meditation album with they're all the meditations for my book. They're all on Spotify. So you can tune in to the whole meditation album. And again, I wrote all those meditations specifically for anxiety, and it's all different ways. One of them is a rock meditation about, seeing. I prompt the listener to use a photo of a spiritual figure. It can be Jesus, it can be Buddha, to see the truth in you so you can tap into it for yourself. So all those are on Spotify. And so for anybody who doesn't know, I was like a dinosaur with Spotify up until recently. It's free. Like, you can just freely download the app, put it on your phone, and listen for free. You have to deal with ads, but because there's a paid version with no ads, but it's available to anyone. So
that's amazing, Corinne. Thank you, love. Yay. Yeah, and it's incredible. As you all heal, you'll share too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're all in it together, so never forget that. Thank you, love. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, thank you. And you'll be sent the replay within the next couple of days, because it's got to download and do its thing. Okay.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.